What happens when two teenage girls walk into an exclusive boutique, only to be told they don't belong? What starts as a simple shopping trip quickly turns into a shocking confrontation that no one saw coming. But they aren't alone, and soon the world is watching. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end to see how this unfolds. If you believe in standing up for what's right, hit that like button. Subscribe now so you never miss a powerful story like this. The Los Angeles sun blazed against the towering buildings, casting sharp reflections across the glass facades of luxury boutiques. The streets were alive with the hum of high-end shopping, tourists and locals weaving through the sidewalks. Among them, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb just a block away from one of the city's most exclusive fashion districts. The door opened, and two identical figures stepped out, Ava and Leah Johnson, the 15-year-old twin daughters of the legendary Dwayne Johnson. Ava adjusted the strap of her crossbody bag while Leah stretched her arms above her head, letting out an exaggerated yawn. "All right, quick in and out," Ava said, brushing a loose curl from her face. "We find our dresses, we pay, we leave." Leah smirked. "You make it sound so simple. What if I want to try on every dress in the store?" "You always want to try on everything," Ava replied with a knowing look. "Exactly. Gotta weigh my options." They shared a laugh as they approached the entrance of AUM, a boutique synonymous with exclusivity and high fashion. The store's sleek golden lettering gleamed above the spotless glass facade. Inside, elegant mannequins posed in exquisite designer gowns, each a masterpiece of craftsmanship and excess. The air smelled of expensive perfume, and a soft, classical melody floated from unseen speakers, setting the perfect atmosphere for wealth and indulgence. Ava and Leah stepped inside, their sneakers making a faint squeak against the polished marble floor. The boutique was spacious yet intimate, designed for the kind of clientele who expected privacy while they browsed garments that cost more than some cars. Only a handful of customers milled about, each accompanied by a hovering sales associate eager to cater to their every whim. At first, the girls barely noticed the shift in atmosphere. But then Ava caught it, the subtle yet immediate reaction of the boutique staff. A woman behind the counter, impeccably dressed in a fitted black blazer and pencil skirt, glanced up from her tablet. Her expression remained neutral, but there was something in her gaze. It was brief, fleeting, yet unmistakable. Leah had noticed it too. "Did she just—" "Yeah," Ava murmured, her eyes narrowing slightly. They had seen this look before. It was the kind that lingered just a second too long, assessing, calculating, and ultimately judging. Leah wasn't one to let things slide. She held her head high and walked toward a display of evening gowns, her fingers trailing over the luxurious fabrics. "Wow," she mused aloud, "these are insane. You think we should go with classic or dramatic?" Ava, ever the pragmatic one, skimmed the selection with a critical eye. Classic. Something timeless. But dramatic is more fun. Before Ava could respond, the voice of the boutique manager, Jessica Marlowe, cut through the air. "Can I help you?" Both girls turned to face her. Up close, Jessica looked like she had stepped straight out of a high-fashion advertisement. Sleek blonde bob, icy blue eyes, and an expression that managed to be both polite and condescending at once. Leah flashed a bright smile. "Yeah, I'd love to try on this one." She gestured toward a shimmering midnight blue gown, its delicate embroidery catching the light. Jessica's eyes flicked down to Leah's outfit, a comfortable hoodie, black leggings, and sneakers, before shifting to Ava, who was dressed similarly. The corner of her mouth twitched in disapproval. Ah, she said slowly. That particular piece is from our exclusive collection. Ava crossed her arms. Okay, and? Jessica's polite smile didn't falter. It's not available for just anyone to try on. Silence. Leah let out a short laugh as if trying to process whether she had really just heard that. Excuse me? Jessica's gaze remained steady. We have certain policies in place to protect our more delicate pieces. Some items require approval before being handled. Ava inhaled slowly, schooling her features into a calm expression, though inside irritation flared. Approval from who, exactly? Jessica didn't blink. Management. You mean you? Leah asked, tilting her head. Jessica's smile remained in place, but there was something razor-sharp behind it. I'd be happy to suggest something more appropriate for your needs. Leah's jaw tightened. What exactly do you think is appropriate for us? Jessica let out a practiced chuckle, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps something more accessible? There it was. The word accessible hung in the air like a slow-acting poison. Leah felt her stomach twist, not in sadness, but in anger. She had been in enough spaces like this, felt the same veiled judgment before, but hearing it so outright made her blood boil. Ava, always the calmer one, squared her shoulders. We're customers, she said evenly. I don't see why we need special approval to try on a dress. Jessica's smile faded just a fraction. Of course you're customers, she said, her voice dipping into something silkier, dangerously close to mockery. But we must be mindful of how our garments are handled. Leah let out a sharp breath. Let me guess, she said, crossing her arms. If we walked in wearing designer labels from head to toe, you'd be falling over yourself to help us. Jessica didn't respond, but her expression spoke volumes. Ava exhaled through her nose, then turned back to the rack and picked up the midnight blue gown. She draped it over her arm with deliberate care, feeling the weight of the fabric. I'd like to try this on, she repeated, her voice unwavering. Jessica's mask of professionalism cracked ever so slightly. For the first time, real irritation flickered in her gaze. I must insist, she said, her voice a notch colder. That dress is part of a premium collection. And I must insist that you stop assuming we can't afford it. Ava shot back. Jessica's lips pressed together in a thin line. Then, in a lower voice, she said something that made Ava's stomach twist. Girls like you don't belong here. Silence. Leah's breath caught. She wasn't sure if she had heard correctly or if her brain simply refused to register it. Jessica blinked, realizing she had let the words slip aloud. But instead of backtracking, she straightened her spine, regaining her icy composure. Ava's grip on the dress tightened. She could feel her pulse in her ears. You're gonna regret saying that, Leah murmured, her voice dangerously low. Jessica smiled, all cool indifference. Let me know if you need anything else. She turned on her heel and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Ava and Leah remained rooted in place. The weight of what had just happened settled over them, thick and suffocating. Leah's fists clenched at her sides. I don't care what she says, she said. I'm trying this on. She turned and strode toward the fitting rooms, the midnight blue dress still draped over her arm. Ava followed. Behind them, Jessica's voice rang out. Miss, I must insist that you stop right there. Leah and Ava turned slowly, and just like that, the moment teetered on the edge of something bigger. Leah stood frozen, gripping the midnight blue gown as Jessica Marlowe's voice cut through the air like a blade. The boutique, once filled with the soft hum of classical music and idle conversation, had fallen eerily silent. Customers and staff alike turned their heads, sensing the tension that now crackled between the boutique manager and the two girls who had dared to challenge her unspoken rules. Ava exchanged a glance with her sister, her expression unreadable but her jaw set. She had seen Leah angry before, but this was different. This wasn't just irritation, this was indignation, a quiet but dangerous kind of fury that could not be ignored. Jessica's heels clicked against the marble floor as she stepped forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I must insist that you put that gown down immediately." Leah raised an eyebrow, shifting her weight onto one foot. "Why?" "I told you, I want to try it on." Jessica's lips curled into a tight smile, but there was no warmth behind it. "As I mentioned earlier, certain pieces in this store require approval before handling. That particular gown is one of them." Ava let out a slow breath through her nose. "And who exactly needs to approve it?" Jessica didn't hesitate. "Management." Leah scoffed. "You mean you?" Jessica's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "That's correct." Ava could feel the weight of the stares around them. Some customers were pretending not to notice, while others watched with poorly disguised intrigue, waiting to see what would happen next. A sales associate by the register was shifting uncomfortably, clearly aware that something was off, but unwilling to interfere. Leah wasn't one to let things slide. She adjusted her grip on the gown and lifted her chin. "Well, if you're management, then I'm asking for your approval, right now." Jessica's expression remained impassive. "I'm afraid I can't do that." Ava stepped closer. "And why not?" Jessica inhaled as if bracing herself for an unpleasant task, then let out a slow, measured sigh. "Because, as I've said, this dress is a part of an exclusive collection, and with exclusive collections come exclusive clientele." Leah let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "Wow, you really just said that, huh?" Jessica's polite mask didn't falter. "I'm simply explaining our store policies." Ava's voice remained even, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. "What you're doing is making assumptions about us. You've decided we don't belong here. That's what this is, isn't it?" Jessica arched an eyebrow. "No, I never said that." "But you didn't have to," Leah shot back. "It's written all over your face." A flicker of something passed through Jessica's gaze. Annoyance, perhaps, or something closer to frustration. "Ladies, I think it would be best if you left now." Ava tightened her grip on the strap of her bag. "We're not leaving, we're customers." Jessica's expression hardened. "You're making a scene." Leah let out a breathy laugh. "Oh, we're making a scene?" She gestured around the store. "Because last I checked, you're the one who won't let two paying customers try on a dress." Jessica's jaw tightened. "If you do not comply, I will have to ask security to escort you out." Silence. Ava's pulse quickened. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, the familiar sting of injustice pressing against her ribs. Leah, however, didn't back down. She took a step closer to Jessica, lowering her voice just enough to ensure only the manager could hear her. "You know, I bet if we walked in here dripping in designer labels, you'd be tripping over yourself to help us." Jessica's gaze flickered, but she held her ground. "As I said, we have standards." Leah's lips parted slightly, as if she had to replay the words in her mind to make sure she had heard them correctly. Then, without missing a beat, she smirked. "Right. Standards." Jessica lifted her chin. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other customers to attend to." She turned as if the conversation was over, but Leah wasn't done. She adjusted her grip on the gown and made her way toward the fitting rooms. Her sneakers squeaked faintly against the floor. a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness of the boutique. Jessica's voice rang out sharply behind her. "Miss, I said stop." Leah ignored her. Jessica strode forward, her movements quick and controlled, her heels clicking in rapid succession. Before Leah could reach the fitting rooms, Jessica grabbed the gown and yanked it out of her hands. Leah stumbled slightly at the force of it. Ava took a sharp step forward. Jessica clutched the fabric, her knuckles white. "I told you," she hissed, "this dress is not for you." The words cut through the air colder than before. Something inside Leah snapped. Ava felt it happen before she even saw it. The shift in her sister's posture, the fire that ignited in her eyes. Leah exhaled sharply, then took out her phone and held it up, pressing record. "Oh, this is good," she said. "Let's make sure everyone hears that." Jessica's eyes widened in brief surprise, then darkened. "Turn that off." "Why?" Leah's voice was steady, but there was a dangerous undertone to it. "Afraid people might actually see how you treat your customers?" Jessica stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I'm warning you." "I'm warning you," Leah interrupted. "This is going viral. Right now." Jessica's face twisted in frustration. She turned toward a nearby employee. "Call security." The employee hesitated. Jessica's tone sharpened. "Now." Ava's stomach tightened, but she refused to let it show. "You really want to do this?" Jessica didn't blink. "I am protecting store property." Leah let out a dry laugh. "Right. Not protecting your reputation, huh?" Jessica moved before anyone could react. She reached forward and slapped the phone out of Leah's hand. The device clattered against the floor, the sound cutting through the boutique like a gunshot. Leah recoiled, her eyes wide in disbelief. Ava froze. The store fell into a stunned silence. Jessica seemed equally shocked by what she had just done, her chest rising and falling quickly. But instead of apologizing, instead of stepping back, she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "You need to leave." Leah blinked, then slowly lifted a hand to her cheek. She had been hit before, on the basketball court, messing around with friends, even in self-defense classes. But this was different. Ava took a step forward, her entire body vibrating with unspoken rage. "You just hit my sister." Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ava's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream, to do something, but she knew better. She knew they weren't the ones who needed to lose control here. Instead, she bent down, picked up Leah's phone, and lifted it toward the light. The screen was cracked, but the camera was still recording. She turned it back toward Jessica. "I hope you're ready to go viral." Jessica's face paled, and just like that, everything changed. The boutique remained eerily silent as Ava held up Leah's phone, the cracked screen still recording. The tension was so thick it felt like the entire store was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to break the moment. Jessica Marlowe's face, usually composed and filled with calculated arrogance, was now pale with realization. She had lost control, and worse, she knew it. Leah, still stunned, slowly lowered her hand from her cheek. The burning sensation of the slap lingered, but it was nothing compared to the fire of pure rage now rising in her chest. Her heart pounded, and for a moment she considered lunging at Jessica, forcing her to feel even an ounce of the humiliation she had just inflicted. Instead, she exhaled sharply and took a step forward, closing the space between them. "You just hit me," she said, her voice steady but seething. Jessica remained frozen, her lips slightly parted as if she wanted to deny it, to spin it into something that made her look like the victim. but there was nothing she could say. The boutique was too quiet. The customers, who had once been browsing, now stood still, wide-eyed, their gazes flicking between the girls and the manager. Ava moved beside Leah, gripping her phone tighter. "You put your hands on a customer," she said, her voice even but filled with warning. "You just assaulted my sister." Jessica took a sharp breath as if trying to regain control of the situation. I was protecting store property." Leah let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Oh, really? Because I was just holding a dress. You're telling me that somehow gave you the right to slap me across the face?" Jessica's mask of superiority cracked. For the first time, her confidence faltered. "You were being aggressive," she snapped, but her voice wavered slightly. "You were refusing to leave." Ava lifted the phone higher, letting the recording capture Jessica's every expression. "Say that again. Say on camera that you think slapping a teenager over a dress is the right thing to do." Jessica's nostrils flared. "Turn that off." Leah took another step forward. "You just hit me, and your biggest concern is the camera?" The boutique's employees exchanged nervous glances. Some of them looked horrified. Others looked like they knew this wasn't the first time Jessica had let her power trip get the best of her. But no one moved to defend her. Jessica's jaw clenched. "You need to leave." Ava's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't get to decide that anymore." From the corner of the store, a woman who had been watching the confrontation the entire time suddenly spoke. "I saw everything," she said, stepping forward. She was middle-aged, elegantly dressed, and clearly someone who had weight in places like this. "I saw you hit her." Jessica's head snapped toward her, panic flashing across her face. "Ma'am, The woman held up a manicured hand, cutting her off. "And I will be reporting this. To corporate, to the police, to the press if I have to." She turned to Leah, her eyes softening. "Are you all right?" Leah nodded, but there was no missing the tension in her posture. Jessica's face darkened. The reality of what had just happened was sinking in, and she was running out of ways to twist the situation in her favor. "You're causing a disruption in my store," she said through gritted teeth. Leah turned to Ava and reached for her phone, taking it into her own hands before flipping the camera to face herself. "Hey, everyone," she said into the lens, voice steady but edged with fury. "I just got slapped by the manager of AUM Boutique for trying to try on a dress. You heard that right, slapped. Because she assumed I wasn't the right kind of customer. Because she didn't think I belonged here." Jessica inhaled sharply. "You can't just—" Ava stepped in front of her. "Watch us." Leah kept recording. "This is what it looks like when someone in power thinks they can get away with anything. This is what discrimination looks like. And I am not letting it slide." She ended the video and immediately uploaded it. Jessica's face turned completely white. "You don't understand what you've just done." Ava crossed her arms. "Oh, I think we do." Jessica whirled toward the nearest employee. "Call security." The girl at the register hesitated. "Now," Jessica barked. Ava glanced at Leah. "You know what? I think we'll call someone." Leah smirked and dialed a number. She held the phone to her ear and locked eyes with Jessica as the call rang once, twice. Then, finally, the deep, unmistakable voice of their father answered. "Leah?" Leah exhaled slowly. "Dad?" A pause, then his tone shifted. "What's wrong?" Jessica's face visibly paled as she caught the name flashing on Leah's phone screen. Dwayne Johnson. Leah took a deep breath and said the words that sealed Jessica's fate. You need to come here, right now. A silence. Then the voice on the other end, dangerously calm. Where? Leah turned the phone's camera toward the golden lettering of AUM Boutique. Here. A slow inhale from the other side of the line. Then, in a tone that sent a chill through the air, I'm on my way. The call ended. Jessica stood motionless, a flicker of something close to fear flashing behind her eyes. That's not necessary, she said quickly, her voice tight. Let's be reasonable. Leah stared at her, unfazed. You should have thought about that before you put your hands on me. Jessica opened her mouth to protest, but it was already too late. Because outside the boutique, the world was already seeing everything. Within minutes, notifications started exploding on Leah's and Ava's phones. The video had gone viral at a speed neither of them had anticipated. Comments, retweets, shares. People saw what had happened, and they were furious. Someone outside had recognized them and started live streaming. Soon, a small crowd gathered, pressing against the boutique's glass windows, trying to catch a glimpse of the chaos unfolding inside. And then, the black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver barely had time to put it in park before the door swung open and Dwayne Johnson stepped out. Dressed in a fitted red tank top, muscles tense, expression unreadable, he strode toward the entrance with the kind of presence that commanded the entire street's attention. People gasped. Phones lifted into the air, cameras flashing. Jessica visibly swallowed. Ava turned toward the door. Leah took a step back, crossing her arms. Their father entered the boutique, the door swinging shut behind him. He scanned the scene. Jessica, stiff and pale. The employees, frozen. The customers, watching. His daughters, standing strong. And then, finally, his dark gaze locked onto Jessica Marlowe. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of an unstoppable force. You, he said, taking a slow step forward, tell me exactly what you just did to my daughter. Jessica's breath hitched, and just like that, everything shifted. The air in the boutique had changed. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was something heavier, something electric, something that made even the most oblivious customers pause mid-browse and the employees freeze where they stood. Dwayne Johnson stood just inside the entrance of AUM Boutique, his presence a force in itself. Dressed in a tight red tank top, his broad shoulders seemed to shrink the space around him. His jaw was set, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were locked onto Jessica Marlowe with a quiet intensity that sent an unmistakable message. He had seen the video. He had heard every word his daughters had said, and now he was here to get answers. Ava and Leah stood beside him, their backs straight, their expressions just as firm. Leah still held her phone, the cracked screen a reminder of exactly how this had started. Jessica Marlowe had made a fatal mistake, and she knew it. The boutique manager visibly swallowed, her carefully curated air of superiority wavering for the first time. She wasn't just dealing with two teenage girls anymore. She was facing Dwayne Johnson, a man whose very presence demanded accountability. Jessica took a slow step back, the realization settling into her bones. Mr. Johnson, she began, forcing a polite tone, this is all just a... Dwayne took a step forward. Tell me, he said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that filled the entire boutique. Exactly what you just did to my daughter. Jessica stiffened, her hands clasping together in front of her as if she could hold on to some illusion of control. I was simply enforcing store policy. Leah let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Enforcing store policy? That's what you're calling it? Ava crossed her arms, her voice deadly even. You slapped my sister." A murmur rippled through the boutique. Employees exchanged glances, and a few customers, sensing that this situation had escalated beyond the boutique's control, subtly reached for their phones. Jessica's face flushed. Dwayne took another step forward, not aggressively, not loudly, just deliberately. And everyone felt it. His voice was measured, controlled, but there was no mistaking the underlying fury beneath it. "You put your hands on my child?" Jessica hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. That was all the confirmation he needed. Ava and Leah watched their father's expression shift. It wasn't explosive anger. It was worse. It was disappointment. It was the realization that this wasn't just about them anymore. This was about every person who had ever walked into a store and been made to feel like they didn't belong. Jessica sensed it too, and she panicked. I didn't mean—" Dwayne's head tilted slightly. "Didn't mean to what?" Jessica's throat bobbed as she searched for something, anything, to regain control. "It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Your daughters were being—" Leah's eyes flashed. "Careful," she warned. Ava held up her phone. "If you want to lie, make sure you're okay with the whole world seeing it." Jessica's face went pale. She knew. She knew that even if she found the right words, even if she found a way to twist this situation into something that protected her, it wouldn't matter. The damage was already done. Dwayne let the silence hang between them, his eyes never leaving hers. "Misunderstanding," he finally repeated. His voice wasn't loud. He didn't have to be. Every single person in the room was already listening. Jessica clung to her last defense. "Mr. Johnson, I apologize if your daughters feel mistreated, but this has gotten out of hand. I need to ask you all to leave." Dwayne's expression didn't change. He let her words settle in the air for a moment, then exhaled through his nose. "No." Jessica blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," he repeated, voice as solid as granite. "We're not going anywhere." A ripple of discomfort moved through the employees. Some of them looked to Jessica, waiting for her next move. Others, the ones who had seen exactly what had happened, looked at her like she was already finished. Jessica shifted, still desperately clinging to whatever illusion of power she thought she had left. "I'll have to call security." Dwayne didn't blink. "Go ahead." Jessica hesitated, because she knew. The moment she called security, the moment they walked in and saw Dwayne Johnson standing in the middle of the boutique, protecting his daughters, it would be over. Not just for this moment, but for her career. There would be no controlling the narrative, no sweeping this under the rug, and she wasn't ready for that. Instead, she turned sharply to the employees. "Back to work," she snapped, her voice suddenly clipped and tense. "This store is not a media circus. We are done here." But no one moved. Dwayne's eyes scanned the boutique. The way the other staff members were too still. The way some averted their gazes. The way one young sales associate in the corner looked like she wanted to say something but was too afraid. That was all he needed to see. "This isn't the first time, is it?" His voice was softer now, directed at the employees. Jessica's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" Dwayne didn't acknowledge her. His gaze remained on the staff. The young woman in the corner fidgeted. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she spoke. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." Jessica whirled around. "You don't speak for this store." But it was too late. Ava and Leah both turned to the girl, encouraging her with their silence. The employee took a breath, then said it louder. "It's not the first time." Another murmur rippled through the boutique. Jessica looked like she had just been struck. "That is completely unprofessional," she hissed, barely containing her rage. "You will be written up for this." Dwayne took another step forward, his full 6'5" frame towering over her now. "Or," he said, his voice even, controlled but undeniably dangerous, "you could admit that you've been caught." Jessica's breath hitched. Ava and Leah watched her squirm, watched the realization dawn in her eyes. There was no way out of this, not anymore. And then, the boutique phone rang. One of the employees hesitated before answering. "AUM, boutique, how can I—" She froze. Then, carefully, she lowered the phone from her ear and turned toward Jessica. "It's corporate." Jessica's entire face drained of color. Silence. Then, Dwayne finally turned to his daughters. "Are you ready to go?" His voice was softer now, meant for them and them alone. Leah glanced at Ava. Their fight was over. They had already won. Ava lifted her phone one last time, snapped a final picture of Jessica's face, then nodded. Leah turned toward the exit. Dwayne didn't look at Jessica again. Didn't need to. As they walked toward the door, the entire boutique watched them go. And as the door swung shut behind them, Jessica Marlowe knew. She wasn't just losing her job, she had lost everything. The moment Ava, Leah, and Dwayne stepped out of the boutique, the world was already watching. The second the glass door swung shut behind them, the atmosphere shifted from tense silence to the chaotic buzz of a full-blown media storm. A small crowd had gathered outside, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. The video Leah had posted had spread like wildfire, and now the eyes of social media, news outlets, and thousands of outraged voices were locked onto AUM Boutique. Ava checked her phone as notifications continued to flood in. The comments were endless. "Did she really just slap that girl? This is disgusting. Fire that manager immediately. Not them messing with The Rock's daughters. Someone call the Undertaker. Boycott this store until they fix their racist policies." Leah smirked at the last one. The internet moves fast. Dwayne stood tall, his hands on his hips, scanning the growing crowd. His daughters weren't just victims of an isolated incident anymore. They had become the face of a movement. A news van pulled up at the curb. A reporter, holding a microphone, rushed toward them. "Mr. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, do you have a statement on what just happened inside?" Dwayne didn't flinch. He looked down at his daughters. This was their fight, their moment. Ava and Leah nodded. Dwayne stepped aside, giving them center stage. Leah lifted her chin and faced the cameras, her voice strong. "This isn't just about us. This is about what happens to people every day who don't have a platform to speak out. If my last name wasn't Johnson, would anyone have believed me?" Ava picked up seamlessly. "This isn't the first time that store has done this. And if we didn't have proof, that manager would have just lied and moved on like nothing happened." The reporter leaned forward. "Are you calling for action against the store?" Leah's eyes burned with determination. "I'm calling for accountability. That manager needs to be fired. That store needs to take responsibility. And people need to start asking how often this happens to those who can't just call their dad for backup." Dwayne watched his daughters with pride. They were strong, resilient, fearless, and they weren't backing down. The reporter turned to Dwayne. "Mr. Johnson, what do you think should happen next?" Dwayne didn't hesitate. His deep voice cut through the noise like a thunderclap. "I think businesses that discriminate should be held accountable. I think anyone who abuses their power like that manager did should never be in a position to do it again. And I think my daughters just showed the world that silence is never an option." The crowd erupted into cheers. Phones were recording everything. And inside the boutique, Jessica Marlowe was watching her career burn to the ground. The press conference lasted another 10 minutes. More reporters arrived, eager to get statements. People passing by stopped to listen. By the time they wrapped up, Ava and Leah's video had amassed millions of views. Celebrities were retweeting it. Activists were weighing in. A movement had begun. Dwayne put a protective hand on each of his daughter's shoulders. "Let's go home." They climbed into the SUV, leaving the boutique and Jessica Marlowe's shattered reputation behind. But this wasn't over, not even close. That night, as they sat in their living room, the weight of what had happened finally settled in. Leah scrolled through her phone, shaking her head. "This is bigger than we thought." Ava nodded. "People aren't just talking about us. They're sharing their stories. The same thing has happened to so many people." Dwayne sat across from them, watching. He had been in the spotlight for decades, but this was different. This was a turning point. His daughters weren't just reacting to what happened to them. They were changing the conversation. Ava sat forward, determination in her eyes. "We can't let this fade away in a news cycle. We have to do something." Leah grinned. "Let's make sure no one ever gets treated like that again." Dwayne smiled, nodding. "Then let's make a plan." Over the next few days, things moved fast. Ava and Leah partnered with activists to raise awareness about discrimination in retail. They worked with lawyers to offer free consultations for victims of racial profiling. They launched the #Stand Tall movement, encouraging people to share their experiences and demand policy changes in luxury stores. And AUM Boutique? Within 48 hours, the backlash was too much. The company fired Jessica Marlowe. They released a public apology, promising to review their training programs and policies. But for Ava and Leah, words weren't enough. They wanted actions. And so, 2 weeks later, they stood in front of hundreds of people at their first Stand Tall event, a community-driven initiative that provided resources for anyone who had faced discrimination in public spaces. Dwayne stood beside them, but this wasn't his fight. It was theirs. Leah stepped up to the microphone. "We started this because of one moment of injustice. But we're continuing it because this isn't just about us. This is about every person who has ever been treated like they don't belong. And we're here to say that they do." Ava's voice was just as powerful. "This isn't just a moment. This is a movement, and we're not stopping." The crowd erupted into cheers. Dwayne clapped his daughters on the back, proud beyond words. This wasn't just about one boutique. This was about changing the world, and the Johnson sisters were just getting started. Justice has been served, but this story is far from over. What started as a simple shopping trip turned into a powerful stand against discrimination. But the question remains: how many others have faced the same injustice without a voice?